1, 2, that's it. Check 1, 2, check 1, 2. Check. Check, check. Check 1, 2, check 1, 2. Check, check.
Okay.
So, first of all, I want to thank y'all for coming. I want to thank Rico and Nikki for being a part of the panel. I'm Najee Dorsey, founder and CEO of Black Art in America. The reason why we got these two wonderful spirits here today with us, along with our moderators, Amari and Farron, is because they're my neighbors. They become really good friends and supporters of Black Art in America. They're avid collectors. And because we're in June and we celebrate Black Music Month, I thought what better way than to have my good friends come and talk to us about what they do in the industry. So with that being said, Farron will lead us off and then we start. Thank you.
So, welcome everyone. Farron Manuel, I'm going to make a couple of remarks before we get started today. And I'll just kind of stand up for a second. So, I'm the director of the Black Art in America Foundation, and I'm also head of programming and exhibition here at the museum. So we're looking to bring more events and talks and educational experiences like this because the education and the art go hand in hand. And through events like this, we're gonna, figure out there are a lot more connections to things that are seemingly disconnected, than we normally think about. I also want to thank Nikki for securing $12,000 in funding for the foundation recently. And efforts like that, and also Rico's support of the gallery really help us to grow our community footprint and the programs that we're planning to do in the upcoming year. We already have some summer programming where we're providing free art courses to about 90 middle and high school students through the Future Foundation. We've given free art supplies to different schools in the area. And we're looking to expand and provide more artist residencies and training opportunities for art professionals. And today, we're here to talk with hit makers about the connections between hip hop and visual art. I want to start, with talking about, hip hop as being the result of, you got a lot of different factors. You got new forms of knowledge and information being put out into the streets of New York through organizations like the 5 Percenters. You got underfunded arts programs in the schools, which, led to people using beat machines for instrumentation, people experimenting with DJing and scratching records like Kool Herc. You got early MCs like Coke LaRock, performing outside in these outdoor venues as a result of this art form, this hippity hop art form not being acceptable in the mainstream, the disco clubs and the concert halls. And to go hand in hand with that sonic art form, that sound art form, you had the visual artists that displayed their work outside in the form of graffiti, like Jean-Michel Basquiat, aka Samo at that time, and also artists like Fab Five Freddy. And it's funny now how 50 years later, on this 50th anniversary, you have hip hop being embraced, and now being embraced by the mainstream, as well as artists like Basquiat, who's one of the highest selling artists at this point at auction, and Fab Five Freddy showing in galleries in Greece and elsewhere internationally. And he's still with us, but a contemporary of Basquiat. So the tables have turned. That's like a turntable reference. But so yeah, I think it's a really wonderful thing, and bringing it forward more contemporarily. You got artists like Fahamu Piku, who did the album art for Killer Mike's rap music album. And you also have artists like Yusef Bell Johnson, who was a part of Young Jeezy's entourage and an inspirational force for his creativity. And just kind of taking it a step even further, if you study the artists of the 1950s and 60s, the African American visual artists, who especially the ones who worked in abstraction, their work was informed by jazz music. You fast forward to today, so artists like Najee Dorsey. I remember, I visited his studio one time. He was listening to Watch the Throne. Or you might go to Fahamu's studio and he's listening to Killer Mike. So, music has always been, an inspirational force for visual art, the same as visual art has been for music, and these two forces go hand in hand. And a lot of times in, purchasing a work of art, you never know what this artist was listening to, and that could also be an underlying reason why you're resonating with this work of art, is because they're communicating, what they're pulling from the music. So, I'll stop there and, get us started with the panel. Amari, you want to say a couple words?
Forgive me for not standing up. I'm going to sit down so I can see my notes. But thank you, Brother Fern. Of course, it is Black Music Month, and so we're very privileged to have here at Black Art in America two veterans in the industry who are both successful and have been doing it for, I think, at least 2 decades, both of you, right? And so it's definitely a privilege to have them here today. We have Nikki Marshall. I'm not going to read bios. As a matter of fact, the reason I'm not going to read a bio is I was watching, in preparation for this, I was watching an interview with Rico. And someone tried to read a bio. I said, no, don't read that bio. Don't read that bio. So I'm just going to speak about them, and they can talk about what they do themselves within the questioning process. Nikki Marshall, I know she did some work with Organized Noise and the Dungeon Family. Also ran publishing companies for Dallas Austin, super producer Dallas Austin for a number of years. Before she went to LA and started working for Warner Music Group. And currently she's with Empire, and she's doing sync licensing with Empire, right? And we'll get into more about what sync licensing is as well as we go on. And Brother Rico over here, Rico Brooks. Rico, I know, worked for a number of actually record stores back in the day, and I'm sure, I guess everybody here knows what a record store is, right? We got some 20th century folks like me here, right? Okay, cool. Worked for a number of record stores before he moved on to, I believe it was Peppermint Music and artist management. Managed some big acts like Boys in the Hood and a couple of other acts as well. And also after that, after paying his dues as an artist manager, he started managing producers and songwriters, which he does to this day. He has his company as well, which does a number of things when it comes to the business. But his main, I guess, role right now would be producer and songwriter management. So with that, actually, let's get it started. And I think one of the first questions to give you a better feel for what they do, coming from them as opposed to me, would be what you do and what that looks like on a daily basis. And we can start with Nikki, meaning that you talk more about sync licensing and also how that breaks down on a daily basis.
Sure. Wait, can you hear me? Yes, okay, cool. So sync is essentially licensing music for film, television, video games, or advertisement. Anytime you see a visual motion picture and there is music accompanying it, that will trigger a synchronization license. And so most of my career I have spent time doing that. On a day-to-day, today that means I'll be checking my phone here and there because I'm handling urgent requests for BET Awards for tomorrow. So essentially it is,
We hear.
they said they hear.
Yeah.
Okay. I can hear it. Essentially my day-to-day is I will receive requests from people who want to use music, whether they are film producers, television producers, or video game producers. And sometimes they want to use songs that are existing in our catalog. Rico has writers in our catalog. Sometimes they want to use original music. Either way, they'll submit what we call a brief. And this brief is just a synopsis of the show, the project, the scene, and they might also tell us a reference of what type of song they're looking for. So they might mention, like we're looking for something that sounds like So Fresh, So Clean, and similar in terms of like it's jazzy, it feels good, but we can't afford Outkast. So it's my job to try to find something within our catalog that works. or to work with our creators and go into the studio and produce music that will suit the purpose. And then also, I then have to negotiate the terms of fees related to that. And then I am coordinating licensing and making sure that our legal team is drafting what we call a long form agreement, and that our finance team is sending out the invoices so that we can be sure that our creators are getting paid.
Okay, I'm going to do, before I get to Rico, we'll actually do a follow-up question on that. You talked about a brief. Is a brief, it almost sounds like, I guess, the analogy in the screenwriting would be something like a treatment. What does a brief look like?
A brief is similar to a treatment. It can be 1 or 2 pages. Typically, it will, as I said, for instance, the one that's coming to mind is probably my favorite that I've worked on recently, which is P-Valley. It's one of the best briefs that I've gotten. And essentially, a brief is, if you've never seen the show, it's a dive into the world. So essentially, it breaks down where it's taking place. It's taking place in Chucalissa, Mississippi. It is a second-generation Black-owned juke joint turned strip club. They were looking for a particular song for a dancer's last dance. This particular showrunner, Katori Hall, she's a huge music fan. So she also was breaking down not only tone and tempo, but she was very clear, it needs to make her want to shake in her chair. Also, she wanted it to be super dynamic because they wanted to be able to choreograph a dance where the dancer, who ended up being Mercedes, there were moments where it would be a lull, and then it would build back up, we would bring the beat back in. So all of those things are included in the brief.
Thank you.
Speak a little just on syncs too, because that's part of my day-to-day too. So as those requests come in for some of my writers and producers, and I'm pretty much almost always gonna approve them because unless it's like a Trump ad, or something that doesn't fit our moral ethos, because I consider syncs like the gift they keep on giving. So not only do they pay you, and Nikki picked one of our songs, which a writer that I actually signed to my publishing company through Cobalt, produced the song 7-Eleven for Beyonce, and that they paid us nicely, you know what I'm saying? And they give us exposure. I've never watched the show, but I appreciate them greatly. So that's part of my day-to-day, looking at those, not only when those requests come in, and we have to approve them in a timely manner, because sometimes there's a short window, like you're saying, like BET, for some reason they're always last minute. So, and then you get them, and then you might miss the window. I recently got one for NBA 2K, which is a good one too for one of my guys. So we're very excited about those. And so a day-to-day for me is actually, there is no typical day-to-day because each day is different. One day I may be going to the studio, another day I may be visiting a photo shoot, or another week I may be on tour, or maybe going through beats and sending them out, popping in another session with the producer, with the artist, or going to a meeting. Also, A&R consult at a label called Records. That's through Columbia Barry Weiss, founded that label, and so I get a wide range of insights. So I'm a publisher, I'm an artist manager, A&R consultant. So just a well-rounded A&R. I'm a well-rounded music executive.
Appreciate you. Good stuff. Tell me a little bit about your time with Organized Noise and the Dungeon family, Nikki.
Well, I want to shout out Cheryl Merritt, Miss Gucci. She's the person who brought me in to Organized Noise. She took a phone call from my dad. It was like, my kid said she wants to work in the music industry, please help her. And she introduced me to Dee Dee Murray, and the two of them, I came in thinking, I'd seen they do this crazy house party, mansion party, on BET, on Rap City, and so I came in really being like, oh, that's what we do. I'm gonna do this huge mansion party. But Organized Noise had just gone self-published, and shout out to Cheryl and Dee Dee, they were like, you need to learn this. And I didn't know anything about it. I had never heard of publishing. I had never heard of sync. And the first thing I worked on was So Fresh, So Clean for a Tide commercial. So yeah, it was great. I felt like I was a part of a family. I felt like people were looking out for me. I saw women who were really smart, very strong, very connected in the city, and they essentially laid the blueprint for my career. So I'm forever grateful for that time.
Rico, I'm going to ask you about peppermint music. Before that, tell me about
Georgia, and just gotta think about a kid coming from Albany, Georgia. It's like 2.5, 3 hours southeast of Atlanta. Coming to Atlanta and seeing like, I just think about it, never seen like black people like in positions of power. So I came here and I saw like, I had a black dentist, a black eye doctor, like everything. I was like, and I rode down Cascade, I saw houses like black people live here. I just never knew that black professionals could have it like that. And so it really was inspirational. But before that, I came up here to go to school, so I ended up doing 2 years at Atlanta Metropolitan. And so I started working, my aunt worked at Kroger, and she was like, hey, look, I can get you a job back in groceries, you know. So I was on the 83, going to Greenbrier, you know, coming down Stanton Road, coming up, you know, from Stanton Road to Camden. And then after I graduated, the plan was to go to grad school, like I was going to go to Howard. I did 2 years at Metro, then I transferred to Morehouse, did 2 years, got a BA, have a BA in history. And then once I graduated, I was supposed to go to grad school, and then my mom said, Tag, it's your turn to pay bills, you know? So I started working at Peppermint Music, and because just during the summer, and then I fell in love with that. And I was like, this is where I need to be. I started reading the liner notes. The liner notes, if you don't know, those are just like the insert that used to come on the CDs or album or tape, and it said who produced it and who wrote on it. I just would see some of those acts that Nikki would work for, like, you know, Rico and like Backbone. They would all come through the mall, like Big Mob. We had in-stores with them, and I was just like, wow. So canceled grad school, started there as a sales associate, got promoted from sales associate to third key, then third key to assistant manager to manager, and manager to like, I was running like several stores, district manager, so we had stores in Greenbrier, the West End, South DeKalb, all the urban centers coming up in Atlanta, and then we even had stores like in Carrollton and Newton, and so it really gave me insight like on the ground floor of the music industry, like customer service, and taught me like, just seeing like all the acts, like, everybody, they generally had to buy a CD, there was no streaming, so you had to actually come purchase. So we had in-store, and I met a lot of managers, cool relationships that catapulted me to the next phase of my career, which is artist management.
Can I point out we met then?
Yeah.
Yeah,
How did you do that?
yeah, when you were working at Peppermint, I think I came for an in-store for, was it back? It might have been.
Yeah.
Okay. So I would say, you know, as collectors and as people interested in art, has your taste in art influenced the visuals that you would recommend for a music project? And if so, how?
I would probably say no, only because I feel like any artist that I work with, it's their project. So I allow their taste and their vision to speak. One of the things, like, from a sing perspective, there's a job title that is really kind of buzzing right now, that's music supervisor. And a lot of people are like, oh, you know, I have great taste in music, I'll make a great music supervisor. And one of the first things I tell them is, it's actually not your job as a music supervisor to import your taste onto the project. It is your job to take the taste of the director and the producer and to provide for them the licenses that they need to bring that vision forward. So I would say there's a parallel for that for me, both with audio and with visuals.
So not exactly, but I have tried to expose some of my clients to like, you know, to like art and stuff like that, but just not like force it on them, but just like, hey, look, you know, I mean, hit this museum, or I actually had an event here for my birthday, and I had a friend of mine, she was drawing pictures, like just drawing portraits, like little small ones, and one of my clients was like, I might let her do my album cover. It ended up not working, but just that exposure, you know, turned him on to now, he may want to do more things.
Nikki, we talked about earlier about the fact that you ran, I guess, a number of Dallas Austin, super producer Dallas Austin's publishing companies. Tell us about that experience and how it came about.
It came about like just about every job in my career, which is relationships. Someone reached out and said that Dallas was looking for someone to run the publishing company. The person who had been doing it at the time, Danny Zook, was moving on. And I went and I had a conversation with the COO. It was very buttoned up. It was very much like, what do you know? And then I had a meeting with Dallas, and it was very informal. And it was like, oh, you from Bay Hill? Oh, you from Southwest? Oh, that's easy. Okay. So that was literally the juxtaposition of that job going forward. It was great. I really enjoyed it. I met a ton of local musicians and artists. I was telling the story last night. I met Lionel Richie, who gave me like some crazy insight about how he came to own, 7 blocks of Rodeo Drive, 9 blocks of Rodeo Drive. And I really came to respect Dallas as a visionary and as a business person. And it really, I feel like that was my first, because I was so young when I started with Organized Noise, I felt like an adult at Dallas's, if that makes any sense. And it gave me a lot of confidence to realize that I could also move beyond the Atlanta market if I needed to. I don't really think that I necessarily always felt that way. I felt so insulated at the dungeon, which is like a beautiful thing, to feel insulated and protected. And these were people who honestly didn't really know me, so it was a chance to like just spark off on my own and see what I could do.
Was the responsibility for the publishing company, is that similar to the sync thing that you do now? Is it different, or? It
was very different. I was responsible for writers and their agreements, being sure they were moving through their agreements. I won't go into the minutiae and details of a co-pub agreement, but essentially in exchange for an advance, you have to turn in songs. So it was a lot of managing artists, writers, and making sure they were moving through, talking through some of their past issues with moving through. It was also making sure that we were pitching these songs to be included on records, to turn these songs into actual records so that they could turn into money. It was also managing split disputes. That was a big part of my time there. There was a dispute about the song. The song was created, we were having a great time, we left the studio, 9 months later, it's a single, and I think I wrote 50% of that song. So it was that. It was also managing audits. You have writers who contractually, they are allowed an opportunity to audit your royalty accounting to be sure that it is up to par, that there are no mistakes. And that's a very, very, what's the word I'm looking for? It is so tedious. It is so tedious. And you're dealing with like outside auditors, so you have to give them access to your books, and it's a thing. So it was more management. I definitely felt, coming out of that, I definitely felt like I wanted to focus my career more, and I wanted to do less of that kind of overall macro management. And also, I feel like, I'm a creative, and sync allows me to have a little bit more creative expression.
Great, thank you. And Brother Rico, tell me your worst horrific artist management story. Just tell us about your artist management experience. If you have any stories like that, let me know.
I don't know if it's worse, because it's like, actually I look for a lesson, if it's a loss, I look for lessons so if it's a lesson that is not really, too much, but you definitely feel it. We're human beings, so you definitely feel it. And the thing about being a manager, sometimes you have to, you're privy to a lot of information and personal information and other people's story that's not your story, and it's not your story to tell. I've been in studios, like I remember when Monica was pregnant, and she was dating, but nobody knew she was pregnant, so one of my clients had a session with her, and I could have got on social media, like, look, Facebook. But that would have been so lame, and I probably would have never been back, and it's not my story, just as a manager, so you have to realize that. So I've been in situations where I've seen like, wow, this is yikes. And so, but you have to learn how to say, look, this is not my story. This is not my story to tell. So I just kind of just keep it to myself, basically. Part of it, another part of my duties as a manager is like when Nikki was talking about those deals, like they are like the music industry is like progressing. So there were deals where you had to turn in songs. Now those deals are now based not on how many songs you turn in or how many songs you do, but they're based on like the term, like a certain amount of years or a certain amount of money. And so part of my job as a manager is say, hey, look, can we get my guy to like not just have this, what they call NDRC deals, but let's transform it to a more modern recruitment, a term-based deal. So that's another part of my job.
Now tell us about some of the groups you work with as far as artist management.
Some of the acts I've worked with, like you mentioned, Boys in the Hood, Block, shout out to Block NT. Block gave me my first job. He came through Peppermint Music with some, he had these guys he was working with, say, hey, I want you to manage them. It was Boys in the Hood, so it featured Jeezy, Jody Breeze, Duke, and Big Key. Then from there, I went to Young Job. I did Young Job for 2 years, Grammy nominated. I think I can't remember he made the fourth list, but anyway, it was a great run, short, and then Gorillaz over 5 years. Then after Gorillaz, I transitioned from artists to producers. So I started working with Sunny Digital, and Sunny Digital led me to Metro Boomin. I did Metro Boomin for 7 years. D-Rich, currently still work with D-Rich, still work with Sunny, B-Weezy. So some of my guys have done tracks for, if you don't know those names, they've done tracks for Beyonce, Drake, Travis Scott, like some of the biggest artists in the business. My guys have worked with those guys.
iBeats as well, right?
Yeah, iBeats did Gallus Chester for Drake. Funny iBeats story. So music is universal. So I met this guy, but B-Weezy turned me on to iBeats, and I started shopping his beats. And he's from Budapest, Hungary, like right next to where they're fighting at, right next to Ukraine. So parts of Ukraine used to be Hungary, if you know the area. So they're fighting, so a lot of Hungarians actually live in Ukraine. And I went to visit. It's beautiful over there. I wouldn't go now, but if you get a chance, it's beautiful over there, you know. So I be sending some beats, and I sent it to Oliver, one of Drake's managers. Drake's manager said, hey, can you speed this up? So I sped it up, sent it back, and he used a song. It was called Gallus Chester. It was great look for him. But we brought him to America. The funny thing is, he didn't speak English. So we go to the studio, we're in with Rick Ross, and he didn't speak English, so he brought a friend who spoke English. And so Rick Ross is like telling him, like, play these beats and say something, but he has to look to his interpreter and say it. And Rick Ross is like, this is so gangster, you know, don't ever learn English, just have your interpreter. You gotta talk to my interpreter. I'm like, nah, you need to learn English. So it's a funny story.
Still appreciate you. Nikki, you also work for Warner Music Group. Is that publishing as well, and was that different from your experience with Dallas House?
Yes, so I started out at Warner on the recording side, so on the master side. I worked at Rhino, which is the company that manages all of the past catalogs. So anything that has been released by a Warner Music Group artist who is not considered frontline. So that's like Madonna, Prince, Jade, Brandy, the Bad Boy catalog. I managed all of that. And there I wasn't doing sync, I was actually doing my second favorite thing in the world, which is sample clearance. I really, really love it. I wish I could do it again. And then I left there. I wanted to work for Pat Woods, who is, Patricia Woods is like a cornerstone of sync. She started the sync department at Warner Music Group, and from the beginning when I worked at Organized Noise, I had seen her name, and so I wanted to work with her, and you know, we were all in the same building, so I was just like, Pat, give me a job. And she did, and so that was, you know, I had a great time doing that. It was very different from working at Dallas. It is corporate music, which is, you know, very different from working from a smaller company that feels like family. And quite honestly, it was interesting coming from, I'm born and raised in Atlanta. I went to a HBCU, so it was interesting for me to be, this was the first music space I was in that was not primarily Black. It was the first music space I was in where I was the minority, particularly at Rhino, and that presented its own challenges and opportunities. I think I really like dug in. It was like, I'm gonna be the blackest girl y'all have ever met. For real. I'm gonna be so Atlanta. I'm gonna talk about Black shit all the time. And yeah, it was really well received. I found that in that setting, I found that my desire to be super genuine and to not shift myself or police myself for people was actually really well received, and it allowed people to listen to my desires, like, well, what do you want to do? And then they just started letting me do whatever I wanted to do, low-key. I love samples. I'm a hip hop kid. You know what I'm saying? It's really cool. Like, I'm right now thinking of Future's Mask Off. There's this crazy sample on it that is from like an MLK tribute that came out in like the late 60s. So I love that, you know? I love like discovering new music through samples. And I also really love listening and seeing how you're using it. You know, it's fun.
So I'm going to go to the Black Art in America archives for a second.
Okay.
So when I first started working with Najee, I wrote a column called Art and Empire, which was about the television show Empire in that first season and how they would use works by African American artists to play into the themes in the scenes on the show. So you might see a Barkley Hendricks with a woman reflecting and somebody gets left in that room alone to think. Or you might see a work by like a Kerry James Marshall or, another artist, but the work always had context that fit the conversations that were being had in the scene. And I'm wondering with rights, what are you thinking about when, how do you know when a song fits a scenario that's been given to you? And what are the times like when you said, I don't think this will work, and you suggested another song?
That's a great question. How do I know? I don't always. I think I really depend. I also like sync because it's a team effort, And so I'm sending a bunch of music first, I am like asking for a bunch of music, and then I'm going through that and whittling it down, and then I'm sending that to a music supervisor, and then they're whittling it down, and then they're sitting, and sometimes we sit and edit together. So when I know something isn't gonna work, it's like, you can kind of look at the editor's face or the director's face, and like, when something's gonna work, it's the same, like if you're in the studio making a song, Rico, you know it. You know when you got like the song, because everybody is like smiling, everybody's head is moving, like people can't sit still. You know it's not gonna work when people are just like silent and stoic. You're like, they don't like this. This isn't gonna work. When have I submitted something because I knew it wasn't gonna work in something else? I mean, I'm not trying to sound funny, but I feel like my stuff always hits. I rarely have situations where they're like, nah, that ain't it. Because I pay super attention to what is being asked of me. And I'm hyper curatorial. So even if I ask you to send me songs, and I'm like, 5 of these songs don't really fit the brief, I'm not gonna send those 5 songs, Because I wanna be, it's like a thing, so, yes, I am. One of my favorite music supervisors just shouted me out in Variety. And one of the things she shouted me out for is the brief that we worked on. She thought when they were writing this brief, it was going to be so difficult to find a song. And she was saying how the writers that we brought to the table, they had a solid first pass. And so for me, that's always the reputation that I want to have, is that I'm really listening to the needs of my client, and I'm going to give you the music that you want.
The client, when you say the client, just to clarify, you're talking about
The music supervisor.
Okay, and the music supervisors work for the different shows? Or,
Yes.
Okay, gotcha, okay. So how much are they, I'm assuming sending the brief, right? They want to send
That's
the brief.
who's creating and
Okay.
sending briefs.
Okay, and in those briefs, how much time would you have, perhaps?
It depends. Sometimes I have no time. Sometimes it's like, I need this by end of business today. Sometimes I have more time. For instance, with P Valley, we worked on that song for a year, 7 Pounds of Pressure. So, it just depends. A part of why we worked on 7 Pounds of Pressure for a year is because their production schedule was very much impacted by COVID. So it allowed us to have more time. But there are often times where I get briefs and I need to get back to somebody like right away.
Last follow-up on that one. If you have something coming back quickly at you, how much do you have time if you haven't seen the show or something, go back and watch the whole series or?
No. But my friends will tell you, I watch a lot of TV. I work from home, so oftentimes I'm working with shows on. Also, I read Variety, I read The Hollywood Reporter, I read Deadline. So as new shows, particularly, again, like I'm a niche person and I'm super black, and even the job I got now, when Ghazi asked me, so what are you passionate about? I was like, music of the African diaspora. Like, I like black music, that's what I like. And so, in my mind, I'm constantly trying to watch the shows that are getting buzz that will align with my experience. Yeah.
Appreciate you, thank you. Let's talk about technology, very rapidly changing technology, the music business. Let's talk about AI. And tell me, it's to both of you, I'll start with Rico. Tell me how much AI is playing into your role as a manager of producers and songwriters, and just actually, I would say more generally for you, since you do much more than just, manage producers and songwriters. How is it playing into your kind of daily life when it comes to the business?
I think we're just getting started. None of my guys are have been using it to help them make beats, but I can see it there's a world where hey, they may have some ideas or they may have a concept in their head and they can say, hey, look, this is what I'm trying to, work through it. This is the idea I'm trying to get out, and they can speak it and then try to make it a reality. But right now, we're just in the infantile stages. We've seen some stuff where guys are, recreating songs, like Timberland did something with Big. My guys haven't touched that yet, but I think it's coming, and I want to be prepared for it. So I'm definitely open to progress, and I'm open to technology. So if you don't know, the music industry has a history of not being open to technology, and it almost was the demise of the music industry when companies like Napster came through. Instead of embracing this new technology, they shunned it and they tried to shut it down, and it almost brought the music industry to its knees. So, but they learned from that. So when the streaming companies came, it's hey, look, we're gonna embrace you guys, but we also want to co-own it. So now you saw all the major labels had a share in these companies, and when these companies became billion-dollar companies, they cashed in for hundreds of millions of dollars, of which they were reciprocated a little more to their clients, which are the artists that help them create that value. But I'm definitely open to it. I also want to speak on sampling a little too, because sampling, I love sampling, but it can also, as a manager, it can be the bane of our existence because it's so prevalent. And if you use it, just because you use it, that doesn't mean you're gonna be able to use it, because you have some artists that say no, and some artists is just known, especially in hip hop, where some of the things may not be as progressive as we may like it, and then, so you may get you trying to say, look, Alicia Keys, but this is a drill beat, you talking about this and women, this is not gonna get approved, you know that, right? And so, a lot of times those do happen, but you don't hear about it, it just gets denied, and sometimes it never comes out. Sometimes the artists try to be slick and put it out, and they could backfire because they could get sued. So, and then sometimes depending on the sample, they may say, well, you can use it, but you won't see no money off of this song as far as publishing, so you can use it, but all the money will go to the estate or to the company that publishes that record.
Similarly, I think AI is still in its infancy, so I haven't really seen how it's going to impact our career and what we do. I'm watching it just like Rico to see. I think my biggest area of interest is how it's going to impact ownership, and if there's any claims that will come from that. I'm constantly trying to figure out who owns what, because that's a part of how we figure out who gets paid. So yeah, it's yet to be seen.
Do you look at it as either good, bad, or indifferent to it, or?
I'm a yogi. I do not believe in good or bad. Things are.
Okay. Rico, how about you?
Yeah, I actually embrace it. I was just thinking about it now. So imagine a supervisor, or imagine a guy who works at Empire or Warner Chappell or UMPG. So they have tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of songs. They have songs they don't even know about. They can't even possibly listen to the songs in their whole entire lifetime. So imagine if they're sitting there and they can tell, hey, look, I'm looking for a song that fits this brief. And they can tell, and then the AI could go through the catalog and say, here are 5 songs that fit this brief. That would be dope, you know what I'm saying? Maybe I need my cut, and I'm joking. I'm sure it's already coming.
So, you know, even with AI being in its infancy, you know, you can take like, you know, me and Amari can write a rap and just put Jay-Z's voice on it. Have you had like any meetings about, you know, what's the nature of someone else is using the voice of an artist that didn't agree to, you know, rap these lyrics or be a part of this project? You know, like what have the industry, you know, meetings been like related to this, or have there been any?
Nope.
No comment.
I just read what like Lucian does, like, so when they put the Drake songs up, they get taken down instantly, you know what I'm saying? So like, they're like, hey, look, we want to protect our writers or whatever, and so they and also it's monetary too, so if these songs are getting streams, then somebody's making that money because it's consumption, so they want to make sure like the money's going to the rightful, you know, owner, copyright, the owner of the copyright. So yeah, so right now they just want to make sure these are authorized and these are the people who, these are their lyrics, and this is the artist, this is the record company, and you're not gonna be able to dupe them because they're fighting vigilantly for this.
Yeah, I want to say too, like, the takedown notices, I think sometimes people are confused. Like, the labels have algorithms that are essentially meant to read and figure out what's their copyright. It's like if you've ever posted something on Instagram and you got the, hey, by the way, you don't own this, that's because the label has an algorithm out that caught it and pulls it down. So that's why the takedowns are so fast.
I would say also, you know, how you mentioned the industry doesn't really embrace technology. I'll say the same is so for museums. So like, you know, working at the High Museum, we almost never had a meeting about NFTs. You know, just, you know, almost never. And I met with the curators almost, you know, weekly. But it's just, you know, it's something about the artist, you know, having that touch on the work. I'm thinking, you know, similarly with the music industry, it's just something about the artist being present in the process that makes it all work. But I don't know. I think AI is gonna like shift. It's already shifting a lot of these things. And even when it comes to rights of an artist, you know, and AI and artificial intelligence is borrowing qualities from artwork that exists out in the world. And you have had some families that have come forward and tried to sue certain companies or have images taken down because they're like, well, this is my dad's brushstroke, or, you know, this pattern was taken out of, you know, some of my father's paintings. So I've seen those scenarios. Just wanted to kind of know that.
Definitely, I've definitely seen that. Like when they, J. Cole had this line, Martin Luther King would have been on Dreamville, and then you saw the MLK with like the Dreamville hoodie on.
I know everybody's now wanting to talk about fee structures all the time, but tell us what you can. I've heard you talk about it before, that's what I'm saying. Tell us what you can about fee structures in terms of artists versus producers versus songwriters in terms of management.
So management commission, just in general, the industry standard is like 15%. But that could vary based on like the level of the client. If they're a co-manager, maybe you bump it up to 20, so each get 10. Or if they're a super artist, super duper artist, then we'd be like, no, we're gonna bump it down. You know, I'm making so much, y'all gonna make so much. So it varies. It's negotiable too. Like I never try to put the money over the person because sometimes you may not make as much money off a client, but the relationship could lead you to other endeavors that are priceless. You know.
Like what?
Like, okay, say if I'm with a client and he's not a great producer, but he introduced me to another producer that makes me a lot more money, you know what I'm saying? So, you know, and, or it could be, not just money, it could be different things. He introduced me to some other people, maybe, I don't know, just thinking off the top of my head, but I've learned to just like, not just base everything off of money, like who's making me the most money, that's who I'm rocking with. It shouldn't work like that in life, you know. I don't personally think so. Sometimes you could be the person who makes you the most money. You may not actually like that person. You know what I mean? You may like hanging out with the guy who makes you no money, but they have a great personality. I try not to put money over people.
Have you ever turned down a large sum of money for reasons of protecting you?
Yes. I've turned down clients, household names that you guys know. I I've said no, and based on my, not that I'm like a saint, but just certain things I just have a baseline of saying like, look, I don't. And sometimes you may see, I've seen these guys, the same guys on the news. I'm like, thank God I didn't take that job, you know, because you may be so hungry for the dollar, but not knowing that you might be in the car when the police pull you over, or you might be in the car when they shoot it up, you know what I'm saying? Or you could be in another situation. So you just have to really be careful and choose like your clients wisely if possible.
Nikki, regarding the fee structure, is there anything you're willing to talk about in terms of how that works? If not, it's okay.
I would say that in terms of sync, I can tell you what pays the most. I can't tell you what they pay. But I can tell you if you are a creator, your advertisements are going to pay you the most. Trailers, ads, promos, that's the big money. And then right under that is film. I can tell you main title or end title. Those are your cash cows there. And then under film would be TV. And then under TV would be digital content.
You spoke about how sample clearance is one of your favorite things that you do. What are the things you like in terms of your the things that you do, but also things that you don't like in terms of daily role?
I don't like when I have a planned talk and people are blowing up my email for last minute requests because they were not proper planners. I don't like that. I really genuinely, my friends will tell you this too, I hate like manufactured emergencies. I'm just like, get out of here, this is not real. But I love the original music process. You know, I love calling my friends like Rico and being like, hey, we got this camp going on. Who do you have? Send them over. The camps are mad fun. We're like locked in for a week. And it's literally going from like room, we're gonna have like 6 rooms going at a time. Typically there's somebody there from the net, if it's a TV show, there's someone from the network, there's sometimes the showrunner, there might be actors, there are producers, songwriters, and we're all collaborating based on these briefs and trying to create the best music that we can. And typically at the end of each night, we meet up in the big room and listen to what we have. We do what we call playback. And so for me, because I started out with organized noise, like just to be back in the studio always just feels really, really, really good. That's my favorite part, is being, I used to say, people ask me like, why do I work in music? I'm obsessed with music, and being as close as I can to the creation of music is just like such a joyful experience.
Brother Rico, your favorite and your least favorite part of what you do?
I love actually discovering new music. I love every Thursday night. I try to make it to 12 midnight. Sometimes I don't make it, so I'll listen the next morning, Friday morning, on my walk or like ride in the car. But I actually love like discovering new music. I get the most joy out of finding something that I think is dope and then being able to see it to fruition. Like, so people think like you manage this big client and they do a big song, that's great, you know, but if it was my favorite, probably my thing I'm most proud about, like, is when I'm signing these guys. That guy, Bobby Johnson from Bremen, Germany, he sent a song, and the song went to Beyonce, and it's 7-Eleven, and like, I was like, yes. So I know I have an ear in the IB situation with Drake. So like, yes, those things. Or even like recently, a kid's like, hey, can you help me shout my beats? I sent his beats over to Rock Nation, Mike Hurst, and Bobby Fishkill recorded a song, and it came out. So those are the wins that make it so. It makes it so joyful for me, like just to see something that I believe in, and I hear it. I think it's dope, and then it goes out to the world and it's confirmed or reconfirmed. The least favorite thing, so I have like this smoke allergy, so like I hate going to the studio and it's smoked out, and then I'm like, can't breathe at night, you know, I'm like, yikes. So that's my least favorite thing. Like, if you want to get me to leave, just start smoking, and I'll be like, okay, where Rico go? It's like,
You
that's
should
my
hang
cue.
out at Bravo Ocean, those smoke.
Oh wow! So that's my cue to leave. But it's crazy because sometimes my clients they recognize it, so they won't they'll just and I'll be over here, and that's the tough thing. So I have to deal with
who's your ideal client in terms of your, I guess, producers, let's start there, producers and songwriters?
Ideally, the person would be talented. They would be a great communicator, a great networker. They would be a great hustler. They would have a great work ethic. That would be ideal.
Is proximity in terms of where they're located or anything, is that an issue when it comes to that?
No.
Could be anywhere in the world?
Actually, I talk about this. I could tell you that you've been listening to my conversation. So, the internet made the world smaller. So it used to be an excuse of, man, I'm from Albany, Georgia. I can't get to Atlanta. But now it's no excuse if you got guys who don't even live here. There's a guy, a producer is in the Ukraine. You know, they're bum and he's waiting, trying to get steady Wi-Fi to send beats. When I hear this, I'm like, this is crazy. Like, he's like, man, I don't feel good today. Really? You live down the street, bro. This is, you know. So I'm like, come on now. So proximity should not be an excuse to not deliver, because the internet makes the world smaller. You have a Wi-Fi, you have a smartphone. Can you go to Starbucks? Can you go to McDonald's and jump on it? You gotta be, if you're willing to hustle, I'll meet you halfway. Sometimes I test my clients. I'm like, they say, hey, I want to get this, I want to do this. I say, hey, how much do you have? What do you have? You know, and if they serious, like, I got this, but you know, and I'm like, okay, cool, I'll meet you, because I just want to see that. Like, if I see like you trying to do something, it's like if a kid is trying to make it and they really want to do it, and I see it, I'm gonna give you that push. But if I see you just like being lazy, like, the world owes you something, I'm like, okay, you think you owe it, go get it.
There's a difference between personal management and I guess a producer or artist, producer artist, and songwriter management, correct?
You talking about like personal management and business management?
Yeah, in terms of, let me ask that question a little differently. Your role in terms of when you're working with a producer, does it go to the personal side as well, or how?
No, I don't pay their, but it's personal, but it's not personal. Like, I don't pay their bills. I'm not like saying, yeah, man, you know, your AT&T bill is due today, or you know, you didn't pay, your mortgage. So no, I would advise them to have like, pay your taxes, get a business manager, because not only it's gonna help me, it's gonna help you, because it's not a good look when you get those tax liens or say, hey, look, you know, you got a $500,000 check, but the IRS says you owe them, you know, whatever, and then you're not getting that money. It's not a good look. So I don't do business management, but in management is going to be personal, because there's going to be things that come up where you may have to go handle a personal situation. But I would advise them to get like a good assistant, so they can do the things that like I should not be running to. I'll go do it, but I should not have to go to like Walgreens to get you some lotion or whatever. You know what I'm saying?
Nikki, in terms of your ideal client, what would that look like?
I would mirror what Rico says, somebody who is talented, number one. Also someone who is flexible, who is down to try something outside of themselves. Because for me, like in sync, like we get to play around. So for instance, you know, working with like writers who are rappers, who are straight men, but we were sometimes writing for queer men who are rappers, who have a different voice, a different tone, a different theme. So I need someone who is open-minded and who can really like see themselves in the other person and reflect back what we need, but also super communicative, because sometimes my timelines are very, very short. So if I reach out to you and I'm like, I'm gonna circle back at 4 p.m. and at 4 p.m. we're ghosts, then I'm not gonna not turn in songs. I'm just not gonna turn in your songs. So that's most important for me. And then also, I talked about it earlier, someone who is paying attention to splits and credits, and you can tell me who was in the studio when this was made, and you know, you can give me a ballpark idea of what they had or what they created or contributed to it is really important. So someone who also has like confidence, I feel like being able to be on top of splits is about confidence. Like, did you feel good in that room? Do you feel like you can say to everybody, hey, before we leave, let's talk about this? You know, versus if you're kind of a fly on the wall in the room and you're a little scared to say. So those are the things that are most important to me.
Now, a moment ago too, you mentioned loving Black music of the diaspora.
Yeah.
So internationally, What are you listening to?
Oh man, right now I'm listening to a lot of Fireboy DML, a lot of Ashake. Go check that out. Empire releases. Love Tina Savage, also Empire. I also am really loving like the R&B girls that are coming out of the UK. If you're not checking them out right now, just because you asked me, I can't think of anyone's name, and I don't want to say anything crazy. But Ray Black is one of my favorite from the UK on the R&B scene. But if you haven't, I do strongly suggest if you have Apple Music, check out the Africa Now playlist. Africa is definitely, which is a part of why I went to Empire. Rico and I talked about this right before I went, is there is a very real, distinct focus on Africa as a continent and understanding that there's Amapiano, there's Afrobeats, there's hip hop, there's R&B coming out of Africa, and I definitely think it's the next frontier. I think our next global superstar will most likely come from the continent.
I just want to just add to that, like, you got to really think about it. Like, when I went to Nigeria, like, almost 20 years ago, I was just amazed at, like, how many people. So imagine, like, when these smartphones start reaching, like, mass penetration and Wi-Fi, then just think about it, like, just the sheer number of people that you can actually reach. And you don't have to, like, go outside of you can really just be speaking to your people. And then, but just because there's so many, so you start seeing, like, you wonder why all these Latino artists, like, taking off. But you start thinking about cities like Mexico City and some of these cities, like, they have, like, they're bigger than, like, New York. So imagine, like, as far as, like, if you speak in that, so Bad Bunny doesn't have to, like, he can just speak directly to it's like, but I don't understand what he's saying.
It don't matter.
So just imagine that, like, so with Nikki's, I'm just piggybacking what you're saying. So imagine when the infrastructure really hits, and then they have their own streaming services. But I don't know everything, but I just could see, like, Africa playing a really big role if you get in there and you treat it and you cultivate it correctly, not just like on some poaching type thing, but like really understand it and get in there and get feet, hands on the ground. The opportunities are limitless.
All right, one more from me. I saw an article recently that noted that no hip hop project has charted #1 in 2023. Is that just because the year isn't over? Is it because Young Thug is in court? Could you kind of give your take on why this is the case?
I thought I saw that, and I read Billboard, but it didn't tell you like everything else. It wasn't #1, but it was 2, 3, and 4. So you see what I'm saying? So like we've had some moments, but we also haven't had like some of the bigger names like they're not in rotation right now. You know what I'm saying? So like some of our bigger artists haven't actually released projects. So, but there also been some strong like this Morgan Wallace. He's like, hey, I'm not going anywhere. So. Sometimes it could be just because you're not #1, you could be 2, 3, and 4. But I also realize too, like the distance between #1 and 2 may not just be a number. You know what I'm saying? It may not just be a number because sometimes I remember when I was working with Metro, and he was like #1, and then there was #2, but there was a big difference between 1 and 2. So just because it's a number, 1 and 2 doesn't. The distance between the number could actually be different, much different than just a number. Yeah, so it's just give it time. We're right there. But also in that article too, you see like what we mentioned, like people are also like listening to music in their own culture. Is a new term called, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. Hello? I'll get the correct term, but basically what's happening is in different countries, people are streaming their music from their country. Like, so if you go to the #1 music used to always be like an American act, but now if you go to like look at different playlists, look at different charts in different countries, the actual #1 song in that country is actually a person from that country. So now it's not just an American act. So they're actually hip hop, because it was so dominant and so pervasive. When people stop listening or start listening to something else, they're gonna take a little hit because people are discovering their own artists in their own countries.
Appreciate you. We're about to open up for Q&A in a little bit. Just maybe a couple more questions to ask. So get your questions ready. I have a question. Since I'm a creator, there's always this moment as a creator, a very, very special moment, when the work that you do is reflected back at you. Could be on TV, could be in print, could be on the radio, whatever. Tell me about that moment for both of you in terms of obviously replacements or something. I guess for you, Nikki, tell me about that moment.
It's still 7 pounds of pressure for me. It's being on Martha's Vineyard and seeing my favorite characters performing that song and having everybody screaming in the house, and just also looking at Twitter and seeing everybody react so well. Also having like OG A&R friends reach out and be like, is that your song? Which in music is like big, because I'm not an A&R technically. So to have A&Rs reach out and be like, did you do that song? That's a crazy song. That song is so hard. That's my favorite song this summer. For me, it was that, the accolades of my peers, and then again, it's a show that I watch and love. So yeah, that was the one for me.
As far as how about film, in terms of any big moments that you saw, something that you're a part of being reflected back at you?
I'm going to say stay tuned. Dropping later this summer is They Clone Tyrone, starring Jamie Foxx on Netflix, and I have a few songs there that I feel really special about.
Yeah, there was a saying that like when the student is ready, the teacher will appear, and then when the student is really ready, the teacher will disappear. So I've seen clients like sometimes I would get like I see them making moves and I'll be like, man, I think you want to be a part of it, but actually your time is up. You know what I'm saying? So I've seen situations like that, but I'm still proud of it. Of course, we're human, so you want to be a part of it, but it's just like you did your job.
Okay, last question again. We're about to open up for a Q&A. But the last question I would say is that where do you think we are, not just in terms of the music industry, this goes to both of you, but in terms of entertainment and music in general? Obviously, we talked a little bit about AI earlier, things changing rapidly, transforming technology. Are we in a good space right now? Are you concerned about where we are? Just a general kind of feel for what these industries together, the place they are, and where we're kind of going with them, if that makes sense.
No, that makes sense. I mean, I'm very hopeful. I feel like we're in a good place. I love the music that's being created. I feel like it's diverse. I think it represents several different voices, several different groups of people. Like Rico said, everyone has someone who's speaking to them. So I feel like if you want to be seen or heard in music, there's an opportunity to do so. And I also, I'm seeing, I work for a very large independent company, and I'm seeing how we're growing, not only from our artist roster, but in terms of our executive talent. So I think that there is a trend amongst executives where we are all looking for opportunities to get on the ground floor and be a part of some progressive change. And Rico mentioned it earlier, I think the music industry, our view of technology is very different than it was for the people who were sitting in positions of power when Napster came. I think that the music industry is actually quite open to technology. They're trying to be in on the ground floor. We're having really high level conversations about these things on a regular basis. So I feel really good about it, quite honestly. I'm looking forward to the next 20 years.
Yep. I've never felt better about music. I never felt better about the future of music too. So what we're seeing currently, and what we're gonna see in the next several years is that like you're gonna see people that we came up with, like their catalogs being valued at. Yeah, not some you couldn't even fathom. If they would have told them like in high school when you started producing, like you're gonna do a $60 million deal, or you're gonna do a $10 million deal, you'd be like, wow, really? So Wall Street has it, they're investing. Music seems to be like immune to inflation or to the ups and downs of the economy. Like people still gonna stream, you know what I'm saying? So I've never felt better. If I bet, and I do bet, I'm correct. Let me correct that. I do invest in music, so I'm putting it out. But I do bet too, as a entrepreneur. You have to bet. Like I put my money down on some clients or some of my writers. Some you win, you lose. As long as you win more than you lose, you're still good. I'm not gonna be the guy in Vegas at the $30,000 a watt or $50,000 watt table. Won't be the guy with several $2,500 bets. And all I need is one of these to pop off, and it's gonna pay for everything else. But I never felt more bullish about music. I'm super excited. Just can't believe it. Like that some of the groups that I work with, like I said, getting like money to, if they do the right thing, they can change the generation, not only for them, but for the next generation. Now, if we get the money and we just blow it, then that's shame on us. But I've never felt better, and you guys can help continue to support by streaming it and pay for the streaming services. You know, not just use your friend account. Trust me, we're all gonna appreciate it, and that the artists will appreciate it too. You guys don't realize how much of a role that you play in the future of the economy, a future of music business too, just by your support. And I appreciate everybody coming out here. It means a lot to me to see like this many people come out on a Saturday. You can be anywhere in the world, you see what I'm saying? But you're here. That means a lot to me. And I'm sure for Nikki, Mario.
Thank you.
Definitely appreciate it. Appreciate everybody being here. We're going to open up for questions right now. Brother Najee, do you want to spin the mic around, or should we just shout out? You shout out, okay.
I got a shout out.
You're ready?
No, I'm a vocalist. So where were you the first time that you heard music?
I was probably in the church, you know.
No, think back. Where were you? Not probably. Absolutely. Where were you the first time you had ears?
Well, maybe it was church or
Not maybe.
I don't know.
This is a definite scientific thing.
No, but that's not.
Where were you the first time
I don't know.
had ears? In
Yeah, I don't.
in your mother's womb.
Okay.
The heartbeat was a drum. The blood rushing through her veins with a string, and she was probably humming. So your mother was the first musical instrument that you encountered. Why is it that in the $40 billion licensing industry, copyright industry, women only earn less than 20% of that money? That's my first question. Second question, the second question is how many women do you have in your camp? Out of, you got 100 here, you got 2 women, you got 40, you got 2 women. What is it with women's music? What is it with women's music? That is my body, my breath, my life. That I bore 2 children that are musical. They came out of a musical instrument. Yet women don't make the money. Why is that?
Can I answer? I want to say that that's a part of why I am so hopeful for music right now. Is I think now more than ever, I started my career in 1999. Now more than ever, I see women in senior level positions. For instance, at our company, we just gave a raise or a promotion to Tina Davis. She is now president of the entire company. There are several young women who are working at major music labels as A&Rs. That was not necessarily the case even 10 years ago, and they are making chart-topping records. In addition to that, you know, I came up in the era of where we only had first we only had Queen Latifah and MC Lyte. Then we only had Lil' Kim and Foxy Brown. And when you look at the landscape of who's creating the top-selling rap songs right now, they are women. So I hear and really relate and understand to your struggle, but I would say that quietly there is a change happening, for sure. You know, sometimes we have to go a little bit deeper. Women's Music Month is when you start to see those features and trades, but I can say in my day-to-day, in the last 10 years, my interactions with women is really huge. Even when I came to this company, I started the first Black ERG, just an employee resource group at Warner. And one of the things I said to Ghazi is that diversity is huge, it's important to me. Like, I have to see it, because again, I'm gonna always be the blackest, right? Because I want to. And he said to me that he was really proud to say that the company is ran by 50% women. So there is, and I see these women, and I'm having interactions with them. So there is change happening, but it's sometimes happening behind closed doors.
Yeah, just to piggyback on that, most of my clients are represented by black female lawyers, and I love female lawyers, black female lawyers particularly, because they come with, it's not just a transaction, there's a passion involved with it, like you can tell the difference. And I always try to have a female hand in my decisions, like, so I always ask my girlfriend, I have a daughter, so I'm very cognizant of that, and I want to make sure she has a seat at the table. We're gonna build our own table, and make sure she has something to talk about. But also, in my staff, like, historically, studying, like, I've always been surrounded by strong black women, like, if you know,
I'm talking about the messages in women's music.
I got it.
This
So
is
the
different.
name of
I'm
my
not talking
company,
about we're supporting the men.
but listen, the name of my
That's not
company
what I'm talking
is
about.
Adele Thomas Music. It's named after my grandmother and my grandfather. So music, as far as listen, if you look at, piggyback on what Nikki said, like, it's never been brighter for black females. Like, look at Ice Spice. I don't know if you listen to Ice Spice, but like, she's like a big thing right now. And then, like, all these black female rappers that's coming up in the game, like, they're really like, before, historically, they would say it's only room for one black female rapper at a time. Now we realize several, it's just talent is out there, just things take time, and I see the progress, I think the best thing we can do is support it. If you see something that you're not happy with,
Go to my magazine. Go to Music Women magazine.
And, any other questions? Okay, go ahead.
I have a question. I guess given you talked about Afrobeat and different types of music in Africa, how are we controlling that? We know we see what happened in the U.S., but we really don't have, at the top, we don't have any control for the most part, ownership, right? How are we controlling or trying to get, we see the possibilities of Africa, but how are we going to try to be the ownership and instead of allowing these people to come in and own our stuff and be we're on it, but you already, being that the U.S. could take, because you already know what happened to us, how could we, not allow that to happen?
I mean, from our perspective at my current company, we're trying to work, particularly in Nigeria. So for instance, there is no real copyright law basis in West Africa. It's been the Wild Wild West. And because of that, a lot of major labels have really ignored it because there was not a real way to honestly go in and accurately collect your money. And so they said, well, if I can't collect my money and it's just gonna be out there, I would just rather not. So one of the things that we're doing is working with local governments. We're bringing in music copyright experts and helping them to pass laws and to create the framework so that they'll be able to collect their income and have really transparent and visible collection processes. The other thing that we're doing is we are signing people to publishing companies. We're signing their publishing companies. So we're also trying to educate the artists so they understand. So where an artist necessarily, before might not have necessarily had a publishing deal because, again, there were no copyright laws for them to be able to move through and collect. We're now trying to give them the education they need so they can understand how to collect worldwide. So it's interesting because I do also want to point out it's not ours to own either because we are African by heritage. But truly, one of the things that I always like to point out is I want us to empower the Africans of Africa. I do not want to come in and colonize my people.
I think it's important that the deal makers, the management on the legal side structure these deals correctly. So one of the things that I generally ask for, whether it's a publishing deal or an artist contract, is like a reversion. And depending on the leverage, you can ask for that, or you can just take less money and say I want to own it, and then you can just distribute it. So I don't know, like if Burning Boy or Davido or some of those guys are doing it, but it looks like they're doing very well financially, but, you know, I haven't peeled back, you know, the onion and just like dig into the layers.
I guess I'm saying like Sony, you know, some of the major record companies over there, Sony and all them. Do we have a black something over there that?
I mean, I would say like Fireboy is signed to a label called YBN, which is African owned and black owned and distributed through Empire. So yes, there are, but just like there was a time when Sony wasn't the huge multinational conglomerate that it is now, you have to remember Africa has the youngest population on the planet. So even the institutions that they're creating are young in comparison to what we know as established labels. So I think in 20 years, you might look at a YBNL Nation and it may be as big as a Sony. But I agree with Rico when you said before, this is where we have to support. So you have to stream. We need to, when they're in town, we need to go to the shows because that's the only way that we're going to allow them to grow and maybe even meet the potential that they have.
Yes, we got one question right here, and I think there was I had one more thing.
The easiest way to get into sync is honestly if you are working with a publisher or a label to have them reach out to music supervisors because the market is really saturated. So independent artists, you know, I go to these and a lot of people tell y'all like these things are just not true. It's so much music. So the easiest way is to get essentially a trusted person to get your music in front of music supervisors. If you're signed to Dallas, like that's Liz Garner or someone like that, they can reach out. And honestly, because you have Dallas's name behind you, they can reach out and just say, we want to sit down and do some information. So we just want to send you some music. Can you send us some briefs? And I imagine that most supervisors will be down.
Next one.
Just wanted to say I appreciate what y'all doing. Nice to see y'all again. I want to pick back what bro was saying. Just about the licensing, because black entertainment is the biggest business, right? But it's no applications to put in. So how do you get started? Like somebody that's just started from the ground up, and a black woman that want to start and get into licensing, or a writer that want to get in your radar. How do like somebody get started and to get it moving in there?
I mean, I think you're already doing it, like going out, seeing us, reaching out to us, building relationships with us. I mean, I was once a young black woman who, again, knew nothing about publishing. And I mean, I honestly, shamelessly was asking my dad, like, who you know? And was like staying on him. And Cheryl will tell you, that summer I was blowing her up before I got to Atlanta. Like, girl, I'm coming home from Hampton. You gonna let me work for you? You gonna let me work for you? You gonna let me work for you? You gotta be persistent, you know, but then when you get in the door, you need to be a sponge, you know? Like, I think sometimes what I see, and it's not generational, because I think even I did this as a young person, you wanna come in and be like, I know a few things, let me show you. And it's like, you don't know shit. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, you have to be a sponge. You have to believe that the people that you want to be around, that they have knowledge to give and that it's worthwhile to be quiet and to listen. And, you know, and again, I mentioned this before with Cheryl, it wasn't just about learning about publishing, it was also learning about relationship building and relationship management and how someone, like Rico mentioned, we've known each other for 20 years. You know, when I met him, we worked at a record store and I was an intern. I had no power. I couldn't do anything for anybody. But it was just like, this ain't cool. Let's build. So a lot of it is that, just showing up for events, you know, making yourself useful. There's a book I really love called Never Eat Alone by Keith Ferrazzi. And the concept of the book is that we've all been networking wrong, because you go to events and you're like, hey, so this is what I do, But really, it should be about, hey, what do you do? Okay, let me think about how I can help you, because that builds like a genuine connection for someone. Because they're like, oh, shoot, like, okay, you want to help me? Let me help you. So for me, it's that, you know, be a sponge, be quiet, but be persistent, you know, show up eager to learn, and show up being ready to help. And even as you move up, like, you know, just understanding, like, my favorite bosses are the bosses who are like, I will do the grunt work if I have to. You know, those are the people that you really see, like, really, really make it. So always keeping that, I think, that mentality of like, listen, if there was something on the floor right now, I would pick it up, you know, without question. So that's it.
You're an artist? You say you're a songwriter or artist?
Songwriter, artist.
Songwriter, artist. This is an artist. So I know a lot of times we want to, you know, network like vertically. Sometimes you got to do it horizontally, you know. So you're a writer, songwriter, artist. I don't know. Producers in here? Any producers? Producers. So I'm saying like we should network. So when I was coming up in the business, a mentor of mine, Willie Hunter, RP, he told me never leave a room with the same amount of contacts that you have when you came in. So with that, I would say I would always have to get 2 or 3 numbers. And I couldn't just get numbers. Back then it was cards and you had to follow up. You see what I'm saying? So imagine doing that like for 20 years. Not saying 20 years, but imagine doing that event after event, time after time, year after year. Your network is gonna grow tremendously. And so, and then you have to follow through to follow. If you're in college, we do internships at my company. I know a lot of companies do. Companies are very more likely to help a college student because they want to see someone that's trying to prove, they're basically saying, hey, look, I'm trying to do something with my life, I'm trying to make it. So, and you're not on the clock. You're on the clock, but you're not on the clock. Like, you may be living with your mom, so you don't have as many bills, so you can really take the time to like dig in and dive in. But you're in a great place like Atlanta. You're at this event. There's so much going on in Atlanta. Like you follow social media, so there's a plethora of ways to like try to get in. The barriers for entry to get in the music business have never been lower, but the chances of breaking through have never been harder because those barriers are so low.
Hi, this is for both of the guests. As for Madam Marshall, you mentioned about going and discovering untapped territory, and I wanted to know if more conversations have been happening regarding when we talk about Black American youth here in Atlanta or in other cities where you have a lot of that population there, and discovering untapped musical territory of those youth. Sometimes, when we look at Black American music, it's always changing. There's always a metamorphosis, right? And the history of our people in this country has often been one of, connecting our music with the times or the energies that are changing ahead. And so we have a lot of these untapped, possible new musical forms or extensions of current musical forms that could be happening. And so I was wondering if there have been any conversations about Black American youth here, whether Atlanta, Chicago, wherever, and go out and discovering those areas, even on the outskirts of Atlanta and the countryside, who are developing new things to make sure that that group is not being left behind while we're discovering untapped territory.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. So Empire is actually a distribution company. So we work with independent labels and we essentially give them label services. So we act as a major on behalf of them. So a lot of our artist roster are young talent coming out of Chicago and Atlanta and New York and LA. I think Atlanta in particular for the last 30 years has been one of the primary territories that people have come to for talent, for sure. I think, again, I love working in camps because Atlanta is so funny. Like if you're in LA and you do a camp, it's all 3 days, it's gonna be people that was invited to the camp. In Atlanta, day 1 is the people invited to the camp. Day 2 is all their friends. Day 3 is all their friends. But it's like dope in that way. Like Atlanta creatives, they're like, I'm gonna bully my way into the studio. Like I'm gonna get in here, I'm gonna get on this, somebody gonna listen to me. So I think like in terms of finding talent, it really is sometimes just like being persistent about being heard. But I definitely think that Atlanta is, it's a priority for most labels.
And these kids are not, honestly, they're not just waiting on labels. My buddy Mo, like they represents a lot of up and coming artists, and they're just putting their music out on SoundCloud. They're going direct to DTC, direct to customer through YouTube, and they're going. It's just like, hey, look, like me, great. If you don't like me, I'm still gonna make my show money, still gonna make my little ad money off of the YouTube views. I'm still gonna do speak directly to my fans. So, but I love those artists. The quickest way to get my attention is to show me proof of concept. So what's happening is, at the major labels, there's not a lot of artist development. We know that. So what happens, you put a song up, it goes viral on TikTok, you get a deal. You know what I'm saying? Hopefully they can spread it out before it dies out, and then you try to find the next. That's the cycle. So, but I'm definitely open to, like, an artist, say, hey, look, this could be the next one, or see something moving. Definitely open to checking it out.
So we have time for 2 more questions. We'll do them right here, and then we'll let Farron close us out. And you can you can continue to network once we close it out with our panelists.
Well, I had a question for each of the panelists, but I'm gonna just limit it to one. So, as a creative, it's very hard to not bite off people's style without crediting or always feeling the burden of having to credit people. So, as a singer, songwriter, my question is for you. I am also vocally compared to like Beyonce or her, which I'm flattered, but how did you separate yourself as an artist or producer?
Well, I'm not an artist, I'm a manager, but my advice to you would be to, like, just come out how you are. Like, I remember, like, there's a lot of artists when they come out, I mean, we all have preferences in life. It's a fact of life. So when you come up, we all had to listen to something, we all had to see something. So you're gonna have those references. You're gonna start off like, I remember when certain artists came out and said, oh, he sounds like Young Thug, oh, he sounds like Future. I remember there was so many artists that were coming up, they said they sound just like Future. So these artists come up because they listen to Future, and so you're gonna hear that influence in that music. It's human nature. But what's gonna happen is eventually come out, you're gonna find your own voice. You know, ideally you would come out, you may have these references, but then you say, look, eventually you're gonna find your own voice, and that's just a process of time. So just embrace that process, don't fight it. So embrace it, and then go with it, and go through it, and then you'll find your own voice. That's my opinion too. I mean, that's my recommendation.
All right. Well, Rico, you know my story. So, sir, I got a question for you, though. Something I've always wondered, and that I admire about you deeply is, the relationship that you have had with the women in your life. Tell me about the influence that your grandmother and upbringing had on you personally to pursue your passion.
Tremendous. Like I said, my company is named after my grandmother, Adela. My publishing company, one of them is named after my mom, Lamita. Yeah.
Where did you first hear that music?
Say what?
I said, where did you first hear that music?
Oh yeah. Like,
church.
Yeah. So it's just like I grew up. I had strong men too. Like my uncles were DJs. My father wasn't like in my life like that, but I had uncles so they introduced me to music. They were DJs, so I would sneak down and go around in the back in the shed and hook up their equipment and play the music. And they would go to the little parties, their little high school parties when they were DJing. And I would listen to Rick James. They would give me 50 cents to steam their clothes. I mean, iron wasn't a steamer back then. It was an iron. Or they'd give me like somebody to clean out their car, and I would be listening to whatever Prince or whoever they had at the time. So it was just, music was just everywhere. But the women, like, it's so important. Like they are so important in my life. So I always like had a respect for women. And for the longest, it actually held me back because I knew how the industry is so brutal towards women. I would not give women a chance because I did not want to put that on a black woman, because I seen the way women were treated in certain sessions, certain environments. It bothered me, but I realized I have to bring them in and embrace it, but I have to tell this young lady, look, I'm going to give you this chance, but you can't go to the studio late at night by yourself. You don't know this guy, you got to get somebody to walk you to your car, because if something would have happened to that person, I would have felt personally liable. So I had to embrace it, but I had to, because you have to teach these young women, like, hey, look, if it's 2 a.m. and they say, hey, let's do a session, it's kind of sketchy. Don't you think, like don't go, it's just something you just gotta, but they may not know, it's my big chance. I hear the stories, I know you've seen the documentaries, like, they was taken advantage of because they were vulnerable, they were put in a situation where they needed another person to say, look, I know this sounds like you can't miss, but you might have to miss this one. You just gotta trust your gut and have someone that is like that you can lean on. So the women, like I can't even stress it enough. They were so important for me and the foundation. I wouldn't be here today without strong Black women.
So before we go, any closing thoughts from our panelists about, what we discussed here today?
Extremely shocking.
Yeah.
I like it. So, can we get a round of applause for our panelists? And, thank you all for coming out to spend this time.